and I see this way too often, is that we get stuck into a career or a part of life that becomes our identity, and it's not our identity because we want it to be our identity. It's our identity because that's what we're told we need to do. Dad was a lawyer, so I'm a lawyer. Mum was a doctor, so I'm a nurse. I'm in this communities, and our community typically has this type of business, so therefore I'm running this type of business.
All right. Hi, Callum. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Mark. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. Welcome to Peak Performance Perspective, where we help entrepreneurs master health, wealth, and relationships. I have to start out by asking, what does peak performance mean to you?
So this is a bit of a maybe a controversial answer to the question, but maybe one that might shed light on a different angle of peak performance. I think that we are often told what we should want and what we should desire, and then we focus on optimizing for getting what society tells us we want before asking ourselves, is this what we really want? And is this something we can commit to? So peak performance can mean all the various elements of optimizing what you do, improving your performance, testing, doubling down, all the technical ways of improving your performance. But I think you've got to ask before you look at how do I get to my peak performance, is this what I want to be at my peak for? Because you can't be at your peak for everything. You can only choose a few things. And if you choose something that later on you find out deep down I don't actually want, you can waste a lot of time. And if you had have just put 50% effort into the thing you really wanted for the same amount of time, you would be 10 times further along in your performance journey. So I think peak performance is all the technical things you need to do to get to peak performance. But it's first asking, can I sustain and maintain this for the next year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Is this contributing to my life, to my long-term health, wealth, business success, and relationships? And if you have chosen something that is what you really want, then if you go and put 110% effort in every day, sure, you'll get there. But if you put in less than 110% effort, you're still moving towards the outcome and you're still iterating on it and improving it. May I share just one example? Okay,
Yeah.
great. So I love conservation. I love helping nature. I'm also very skilled at content creation, especially written content. I don't always put in 110% effort to getting better at conservation and written content, but because this has been a theme of mine for the last 6+ years, I've got to a point where I know a lot about both fields and I'm able to add a lot of meaningful value to this space, because I would say that I'm moving towards a peak performance, but it's not like I'm putting in 110% effort every single day, although at the moment I probably am. But that's because I've picked something that I know that I'll still want to be doing in a decade's time. And so that way, any improvement in my performance, any improvement in my skills, my knowledge, my connections, and my ability to focus on this area is an investment into ongoing improvements and ongoing performance.
So many interesting and amazing points you brought up. You talked about how almost always told by society what to do, and how peak performance is about really figuring out, do I even want to do this in the first place? The reality is, finding an answer to that question is harder than we think. So many of us go about life not really knowing what we are truly good at. You go to school, you're good at math, they tell you you're really good at math, you should pursue that. But that may not be one's passion. So, how does one really go about finding out, what am I truly good at? Or what am I going to really enjoy sustainably working on?
That's the $1 million question of life. It's hard, and some people just know it. Some people feel they're given it. Some people never find what they should be doing. But what a lot of society does, and I see this way too often, is that we get stuck into a career or a part of life that becomes our identity, and it's not our identity because we want it to be our identity. It's our identity because that's what we're told we need to do. Dad was a lawyer, so I'm a lawyer. Mum was a doctor, so I'm a nurse. I'm in this communities, and our community typically has this type of business, so therefore I'm running this type of business. And that's perfectly fine if you enjoy it. When it's a problem is when you start letting that absorb your whole life and it takes up so much space. You're working and thinking and talking about it in all hours, and you don't have space to ask, is this what I want? I think if you don't know what you want, I would say just don't go fully into the deep end on something to the point where it becomes your identity, because that doesn't give you space to really ask what's going to bring me the most fulfillment and live my best life. But if you do think that maybe this is what I want, or I feel like I'm picking up on a scent here. Maybe this is somewhere in the angle of the path I'm looking for, then definitely follow your nose. I'm not a career or a life coach, but I certainly have had my journey. I wanted to be a scientist growing up, and my family was in business, and I ended up going down the business path. And I spent years as a salesperson, as a marketer. I've built companies, I've traveled around the country selling, I've done all these things, but ultimately it's come full circle back to now I spend probably close to half my working hours building our own charity to help nature and help the environment through science and through communications. So I went down that path of I feel like I should be doing this business thing and I feel like I should be building this biggest company as possible. But what I found was that a lot of those areas I went down were dead ends, not because there was an opportunity, but because when I really got into it, it wasn't what I actually wanted. And sure, I optimized for performance in all those areas and I got some really good success stories. But ultimately, because I'm not doing it now, that performance is a fraction of what it could have been if I just had spent half the time on what I wanted to do.
What inspired you to start this part of your journey where you are in marketing and social entrepreneurship?
So the marketing part came from my father and also hearing about the fun you can have if you go to university. So I went down that path and I followed my nose. But I was driving around the country working for the family business at the time. We were importing carpet and floor coverings and various types of flooring. And I was driving around the country selling it to retail shops. And throughout that time, I'm here in New Zealand in Aotearoa in the Pacific, bottom of the world, so to speak. And I saw all this farmland and I thought, this is beautiful. This is nature. These cows are how it should be. And turns out I was really wrong. Turns out just days ago, this was all native forest. And I started learning about this. And then I went overseas on a bit of a backpacking trip and I discovered this plant called manuka. It plays a really key role in bringing back our native forests and restoring our ecosystems. So I ended up starting this company called Manuka Essentials that we made skincare from this plant's leaf extract. And the idea was that create demand for native plants, give landowners a reason to plant native forest. And in my personal life, I was volunteering, making traps, helping plant native trees, doing all various conservation stuff. And I met my partner who works with endangered species like kiwi and penguins, and we got together and it just absorbed my whole life. And I built an agency, but we used a lot of the profits to help community environmental projects. And it just became this thing that I could keep running my business because that meant I had the flexibility to the environment. And that's just how it's all evolved, really. It's just turned into, following my nose.
In your marketing world, you have come up with a concept called empathetic listening. Can you explain this concept of empathetic listening and how it can accelerate success?
Yeah. So I've got some ideas to share here, but before I get into that, I'd love to know what you think about listening empathetically in a marketing context.
Really, truly, and not thinking about what the person is saying, but reading their thoughts. And that requires going past the obvious for me. Everybody's selling a shoe, but I think Nike's marketing is based on empathetic listening that when the trainer or when the athlete is up 4 o'clock in the morning and running, they feel alone. So the commercial talks about we are the light that is shining on you at 4 o'clock in the morning when it's cold and you're alone. We are with you every step of the way. It's understanding that, I need a shoe and I need a shoe to be able to be waterproof and all of that. That's my surface level needs. My deeper needs is that it's hard to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning running by yourself. I don't know. You're the expert. You tell me.
I love it that you've nailed it. And I think that's exactly it. A lot of businesses think about sales and marketing as in what is the number I need to get? What's in it for me? How can I get more sales from you? And that's not how customers think. They think, what's in it for me? What do I get from you? What do I get if I buy from you? And so empathetic listening is about understanding the deeper needs of your customers. It's about exactly what you said, understanding not what they're buying, but why they're buying. When I work with clients in a coaching capacity, one of the early things we do is we interview their best customers or people they would like to be their best customers. We ask them a series of questions to understand their problems and the pain points and the struggle that comes from not solving the problem that their product or service provides. What triggers are triggering them to actually take action to solve it? What are the objections to buying? What are the alternatives or competitors, and why are they good and why are they not so good? What are the benefits of buying from you, the outcomes? What's possible now from buying your product or service that wasn't before? So it's really digging below that surface level. How much waterproofing? What's the tread on this tire, on this shoe? Sorry, and really saying, why do I buy this? And I just as we talk about this, I'm thinking about there's a guy who keeps coming up on my YouTube feed. I might be botching the name. I think it's Rory Bloomfield, this Welsh guy who runs one of the main advertising agencies in the UK. And he has a lot of stories like this where, for example, he was saying when people were complaining that the train was taking too long in the UK. And they hired the engineers and they said, let's spend billions of dollars shaving a few seconds off it. And he said, look, you could spend a quarter of that money and put models around handing out drinks the whole way, and people would ask if you can slow down the train. He explains about how if you want to stop people complaining about the elevators taking too long to get your floor, just put a mirror in front of the elevator so people can look at themselves in the mirror. So it's really it's digging below that surface level. If you like, I've got a free resource. It's a Google document that your listeners can have for nothing, and it's got a series of questions and a bunch of tips and instructions to really do that empathetic listening, to really interview your customers and understand their needs. It's called the Customer Interview Toolkit. Would you like me to share that?
Yeah. Share it with me, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Okay, fantastic.
Almost always as a marketing company, when you're going in for a new client and you ask them, what's the problem? Is that I have no leads. And that's everybody's problem, right? So can you share a story, a success story where empathetic listening transformed a client's marketing result? What was happening? Just a brief analysis of what was happening. And when you dug past the obvious, you realized this is really not the problem. This is the problem.
I've got an example, and it's still in progress, so we haven't seen the full outcomes from it yet. I've got other examples, but this is just a really prime one I'd like to touch on. This client I've got, they're a commercial cleaning company, and they bring really high-grade cleaning to offices, various commercial facilities, childcare centres, healthcare buildings. And in their communications, they were saying, look, we will provide medical grade cleaning. We will provide eco-friendly cleaning. We're going to use eco-friendly chemicals but then after doing customer interviews, we found that whilst those are nice to haves, what the customers want is to be able to call a helper during business hours that's actually at work during that time, because a lot of the cleaners work after hours. They need the cleaners to be flexible. They need to be able to write some feedback down and have it learned and remembered, so that when the cleaner moves on, because that's normal in this type of industry, that the new cleaners remember their feedback. They need to know that if that door was closed, to leave it closed when you leave. They need to know that if there's confidential documents, that they're shredded and that they're disposed of properly, that the chemicals they're using aren't poured down the drain, that these cleaners are trained to a high standard. And so all the competitors out there are saying we can do it with eco-friendly chemicals, we can do it cheaper, we can do it faster. But a lot of the clients are actually saying, I'm a lawyer and my time's worth X hundred an hour. And if I spend half an hour fixing the cleaner's mistakes, that's worth a lot more than just getting a cheaper cleaner. Now we're going through a big website overhaul, and originally it would have gone down the lines of, yeah, we can do this medical grade. Here's all the specifications of how we clean your facility. Here's the eco-friendly certifications of our chemicals. And now we're talking about, are you just sick of repeating the same thing to your cleaners? Are you really annoyed with having your stainless steel sink scratched? Are you just over the frustration of having to justify why this cleaning company that's your responsibility as the manager of the facilities is not performing to the CEO? Don't worry. You call us and it's done. And it's a very different conversation. And I'm agreeing. I'd love to say that eco-friendly chemicals are selling the business, but it's not. I've got a hassle. And in my 40 or 50 hours a week of work, I've got to solve that hassle. And if I've got to spend more time than I absolutely have to, then you're just making my job harder. So why don't we make your job easier?
In a way, using empathetic listening, you were able to dig past the obvious, get the real concerns, the real needs of the client, and be able to not only provide that, but say it in a story format. Tell us a little bit about how you go about storytelling when you are working with businesses to highlight their strengths.
Love this question. There's a lot of frameworks out there that can work. The hero's journey is a good one. There are many ways that this can play out. The one storytelling format I probably use the most, and I find the most practically useful, is the 5 Ps, or slightly augmented. So if I'm thinking about a sales page, for example, and this can apply to in-person conversations, it can apply to blog content, other types of content, but I'll take a landing page or a sales page on a website. It's a really clear example. First, I'll have an overview. So we help you to go from X to Y to achieve Z outcome, for example. We can say it in more fancy terms, but that's basically what we're saying is at the top. The problem is next. What is the problem? What is the pain point? How does that hurt? Next is the promise. What is the solution or the outcome that we're promising you that you get when you choose us to solve your problem? What is the product? or the service, or what is the offer? What is the piece of substance that's delivering on the promise? What is the proof? This can be credentials, it can be customer testimonials, case studies, it can be examples of how long you've been in the industry and your resume, depending on the circumstance. And then the purpose, if you have an underlying purpose, like we give back to nature, then we'll talk about that last. But it also can just be the price or the call to action or the inquiry form. This touches on different parts of our brain and it really takes us through this journey. It's saying the overview at the top is, hey, at the start of any conversation is, would you like to solve this problem? Let me hook you in. Let me grab your attention and say, have this transformation in your life. We can do this together. Can I get a bit of your attention to hear it out? Hear me out. Next up is, here's the problem. We're digging into the pain. This builds up tension. The promise relieves that tension by saying, hey, we can solve this problem. We are the right fit for you. And it's also, whilst it's relieving the tension, it's retaining the attention. Moving into the next three is basically saying how we're going to deliver on that. So the product and proof are saying, here's how we're delivering. Here's the credibility we have. And the purpose is taking it to a wider level, or the price or inquiry form is saying, take the next step. Come on, let's take action.
How does that change when a company has multiple products that they're offering? Because now there isn't just one problem statement, right? Each product has different goals. They are all under the same umbrella, right? And we can use specific examples if you want, like a business coach who offers sales programs and marketing programs and social media programs, all these different types of programs. How do you combine them together to talk about one pain point, or do you separate them out?
It really depends on the problem we're solving. Sometimes a whole range of different problems fit under a larger overarching problem. So I help companies, me personally, I help companies to websites into 24 customer getting machines and build their world-class marketing teams that can scale up their business to bring their dreams to life. But within that's a big pain point, is I don't know how to get from A to B. It's almost so big and hard to fathom that I don't really talk about that much because it's such a big problem. But within that, there's a lot of smaller problems. I don't know my ideal audience. I don't have a suitable website. I'm not getting traffic. I'm getting traffic, but I'm having to pay for every click, and I'm not getting organic, etc. So many other problems. So I think, yes, it really depends on how you want to creatively apply this to your situation. And I don't think there's a one right or wrong answer, but we can use frameworks as tools to guide us. One is break it out into different products or services where each product or service solves a specific pain point. But then you've got to ask, how do we get that in front of the customer at the right time? And how do we execute on that? Because you can have all this communication, but ultimately, if it's not getting in front of people's faces when they need it, then it's just a waste of time and resource. And it can take a lot of resource if you want to do it really well. The next up is another framework we can look at it through is the brand triangle. So there's the personal brand, the company brand, and the product brand. And you might say, hey, I have 3 companies. Each company has, say, 2 or 3 different offers. And so the personal brand builds trust in everything, because when they see that Mark is behind this, they trust it. Lots of celebrities use this, where look at Mr. Beast, he's got Feastables, he's got a range of other companies, and they might not be the best snacks in the world, to be fair, but because Mr. Beast's behind it, I want to buy it. That's cool. And then the company brand is what brings together all the different product ranges. So that's another way to look at it. But yeah, if you have a specific example, I'm happy to share my input. But I also think it's important when you're talking about this foundational, strategic, structural stuff, not to rely on cookie cutter, do A to get B. But it is important to, just like you listen to your customers, empathetically think about, what is your goals? Where are you trying to get to? What is the future of your business? What are you trying to achieve? Because someone who's trying to take over the world and make billions of dollars is going to have a different structure to someone who has a problem that they want to solve and a nice life they want to live with their kids.
You help companies turn their content into 24/7 customer getting machine. If I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, I want that, but I don't know how Callum does it. So can you talk a little bit about what's the process so people understand what that does even entails?
Yeah, sure, with pleasure. So there's a few elements to it. Firstly is understanding where you're at within your marketing journey. You might have nothing set up, not know your ideal customer, not have any online presence, and need everything set up. You might have a really clear idea of your ideal customer. You might have that really well communicated with only a few tweaks needed, and you might have a base of content that you can work with. So the first thing is asking where you're at. To understand this, I like to think of an analogy called the fishing analogy. So to go fishing, first you need to know who your ideal customer, what type of fish you're targeting. This is like knowing your ideal customers, their pain points, all that empathetic listening and making an offer that's going to be suitable for them. The second stage is that you need to get the right equipment, your fishing rod, your lures, your bait, your reel, your net, however you're fishing. That's like your website, your email marketing system. If you're running ads, your ad account set up, your analytics, your opt-ins, your lead magnet, however that looks for your specific situation. Then you want to go out and try fish. So see what works. But you accept that when you go fishing, the first time you cast your line, you're not going to catch the biggest fish in your life. You're going to keep testing and improving and building your skills and building your strategies, deciding when you show up, where you show up, what bait you use, talk to other fishermen, try their methods, try and glean a little secret spot from them if they've had a few beers, if they're feeling kind. The same with marketing. So you're going to try stuff based on your hypothesis, and then you're going to test different things and double down on what works and then grow from that and build your capabilities around that. So that's the exact same thing we do. Is if you don't know your ideal customer and you don't have the right assets set up, we focus on stages 1 and 2. Once you've got a really good foundation, we then go out and produce content and promote it. I could go very deep, and it depends how detailed you want to go here. But just one other thing I'll leave you with is a really important thing we do is create primary content. So do a heavy lift to create a really good piece of content. That could be a podcast like our discussion now. It could be like a downloadable guide that's taken a lot of work to make. It could be a webinar. It could be like a really detailed blog, and then or a YouTube video. Then we cut that up into bits of content that we can put it out on the internet, and we make sure that our content is touching on different stages of the buying journey, from not being aware of your problem to being ready to buy your solution. Yeah, and then basically get it out there. And as people are ready to move through the buying process, they'll find you. The specifics will vary depending on whether you're running ads, whether you're doing SEO, whether you're doing co-marketing and collaborations. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, let's talk. That's really good, but I'm curious a little bit about the primary marketing content that you mentioned, right? If that is the primary content, what is the secondary content? Is that just now I'm curious?
So I'll give you an example. Our charity, my partner and I, charity Conservation Amplified, runs the People Helping Nature podcast. We get people on the podcast who are experts in their field that are helping nature, and we'll make a 45-minute to an hour-long podcast episode. While we're editing that episode, we'll keep an ear out for the best parts, and we'll snip out reels, 30 to 60 second bits of video of the juiciest, most interesting, most fun and insightful bits of content. We'll then turn them into 9:16 videos with our logo and text on the screen of what they're saying, and we might get anywhere from 4 to 10 reels from each episode. We then post them on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, one day TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and then those reels get a lot more engagement because there's a lot less of a commitment to actually watch them. And a small percentage of those people will move through to listen to the full podcast, and a small percentage of those people will move through to being on our newsletter and receiving future content. And at this stage, we don't sell them anything, but at some point in the future, we might say, for example, here's an online store. Do you want to buy some products? Or we've got a sponsor of our podcast, and so essentially we're monetizing every viewer. And so that's the way that we've made primary content as the episode, and then we've turned that into secondary content. We've promoted that on social media. Yeah, it can look different depending on your channel. If it's say SEO, search engine optimization, we might have one really in-depth blog on a particular topic that's a really key pain point, a really key strategic question or issue within the buying process that moves people to buying. And we might put a lot of work into that. And then we might and that might have a lot of search volume for that keyword. And then we might take related but more niche keywords off that blog and write shorter, relevant pieces and then interlink them all together so they become like a hub of blogs and content. We've done that with a lot of clients and seen a lot of success with that strategy.
How has your experience working with native forests in New Zealand influenced your business strategies?
Ooh, that's a good question. You're full of them today, aren't you? I think personally, I love to observe things, seeing the ecosystems and how they thrive. People often think that nature is this cutthroat, everybody's in it to kill the others, and that it's dog eat dog world out there, so to use a cliche. And it is to a certain extent, but as much as there's competition, there's also collaboration. As much as there's the raptor, the falcon eating the rat, the small birds in the forest, there's fungal networks that keep old trees alive that should be dead because they have a connection with the other trees around them. Just as much as there are vines that in our forests that strangle a tree and suffocate it over hundreds of years and then take over its shell and become a giant forest tree, there are other epiphytes or trees that plants that live on trees that bring it nutrients and help it to actually grow. And I think that's the same in business. There's times and places where we should be competing and looking to beat our competition. That's also very important. But we don't just want to be competitively trying to beat everyone all the time. There's also room for collaboration and growing together. Yeah, I think that's an insight. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have the best answer for it, but yeah, I think a lot of what happens in our life is reflected in nature, or nature is reflected in our lives. And sometimes I find personally, when I'm stuck working, staring behind a screen, I get very narrow-minded and I'm like tunnel visioned. But then I go out to nature and I just zoom out, and sometimes that's when I have my best ideas. And sometimes it is you see some little detail and that connects back to, oh, we could work this way because nature works that way.
What advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are trying to scale their business while maintaining a strong social impact? Because almost always one takes away from the other.
It's getting easier. It's not always been easy, but there's a lot of really cool solutions coming out. I think a good place to start is, what social impact do we want to make? It's a lot easier to make a meaningful impact if you focus on one or two things. If you are trying to save our biodiversity, offset your carbon, help homeless people, protect from famine and poverty, and 15 other causes, that's great. And there are tools like B1G1 that can allow you to do that all effectively. But for most businesses, especially smaller businesses, I would ask, what's closer to your heart? Is it a dog shelter, an animal shelter? Is it helping your native forest locally? Is it something else? And then really just ask, how can we make a meaningful contribution to that? So I guess if you're proactively going out to make that impact, there's that. There's also, how do you communicate that? How do you communicate that for value? But if you're going to communicate that as part of your marketing pitch, keep in mind that most customers won't care. Most customers might nod and politely smile, but that's fine. It's just do it for yourself if you want to make an impact. But I would also mention that there are some really cool softwares and tools that are coming out that make this easy. One, like I mentioned, was B1G1. This app is essentially micro giving. Have you heard of B1G1 before?
I have not, but I've heard of micro giving. But tell us
Okay.
our
Yeah.
audience.
So basically, B1G1 is an app that finds projects, environmental, social, governance, leadership, various really valuable causes around the world. And then they vet them, they make sure that they're worthwhile of giving to. And then they break down their impacts into the most micro change you can make. For example, if there's a water shortage in a certain town in a developing country, instead of saying it's going to be this many hundreds of thousands of dollars to solve the problem, they'll say the cost of water for a day is 1 cent. So every time you send an email, you can give people, one person, water for 1 day. And they break down these impacts across all different metrics. But what that means is that you can be very flexible in how you make social impact a part of your business. For example, you might say, a good example, I have a coach and they say, when you refer a customer to us, we'll give $250 to one of these 3 charities, or you can go into B1G1 and you can choose one of these like 50 different charities, and you can choose how you want to make an impact just from referring us a customer. Some people say, if it's a higher ticket offer, like marketing agency, they might say, okay, every time we send a proposal, we'll plant 10 trees in the Amazon, or something to that effect. And it's really simple because they give you the tools to promote it, and you just click a button and it debits money from your account, and that's it. And I think you pay a monthly subscription. Another example is a New Zealand-based company called Carbon Invoice, and they have made it really easy to mitigate the impact of your carbon emissions as a company. Before they were around, it was such a hassle to even know how much your carbon emissions are. It's consultants, months of effort, dozens of hours. It's not fun. It's a real pain. So they made this app where you answer a few questions and drop down like boxes. You connect it to your accounting system. It analyzes all your invoices and then tells you your carbon impact and how many native trees you need to plant locally in your region. and the monthly cost to do that within 3 minutes. And then you basically put your credit card details in, and it then starts funding native trees in your region. You can go along to planting days and make it a team building event to grow the loyalty of your team. They then give you marketing assets and materials. They give you, I just signed up like 4 weeks ago and I was so blown away. Like they give you social media post template, like posts that you just upload your logo and then you can announce and promote it. That when you have certain milestones, you can share posts, how many trees you've planted. You can then have, if you're going for a government or a large corporate tender, often these days you need to show your ESG metrics. And so there's automated reports based on the trees you've funded and how it's calculated and your impact and all those metrics. And it automatically generates it. So all you need to do is download the report and attach it to your proposal. And they do a range of other things. So I think those two apps would be really good ones to look at. And then just the third thing I would say is do what's realistic for you. Do something that you don't have to do everything today. If you want to make a social impact, just start with what you can and follow your nose. And if you enjoy it, and if it, especially if it leads to growth, but if it leads to satisfaction, it's something you're likely to continue over time. And I always say the biggest results come from 10, 20 years of doing this, not from a 6 month spurt of passion and then forgetting about it.
There are many marketing companies who are helping businesses get better, but I have never spoken to anybody who uses empathetic listening in marketing because almost always we are so tactical. And in the marketing world, we're talking about leads and conversions. Behind all the Excel of the numbers, we forget that company is creating a product or a service that is helping a real human being at the other side. And being able to listen to them and serve them, I think it's what makes you and your products and your services unique. On top of that, running a business is not an easy task. It is a baby that needs constant attention. But you not only run this business successfully, helping 40, 50, 60 hours working on other companies' problems, solving them, you're also devoting significant amount of time and energy and mental bandwidth into a social cause that you truly care about when you don't need to. And that speaks volumes about the type of person you are, the type of personality you have. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show, Callum, but I know I'm going to get a lot of hate if I get a marketing expert on the call and I don't get to have them tell them some type of a secret, a marketing secret. So everybody wants to know, what is the newest thing? Is there a tool? Is there a hack? Is there a tactic? Is there a new platform? Give us something that you know of that you think is going to be exciting for entrepreneurs listening to this.
All right. I'm going to go for the cliche one and say generative AI is fantastic.
Can
Now,
you tell us what it is for those who don't know it?
okay. So ChatGPT, AI, I think most people in the world have heard of ChatGPT by now. It's essentially has all of the world's knowledge in its database, and you can ask it questions and have a conversation, and it will give you answers for anything from producing code to legal documents, or at least first drafts, blogs, sales pages, websites, answers to your questions, competitor research. It's connected to the internet. It can do amazing things. I was using ChatGPT for about a year and a half, but I've recently switched to a new tool, and I rate it so much more than ChatGPT. And if you are using AI and you're using ChatGPT and you're thinking I could get more out of this, try this app called POE.com. It essentially it connects all the main AI tools and hundreds of different bots into one platform, and you pay one fee. And for that, you get ChatGPT Premium, Claude, Gemini, Llama. You get Playground. You get like all these different tools, image generation, video generation, all these apps. I mostly use Claude for my work. I find it's a lot better than ChatGPT, especially when it comes to writing content or coming up with articulate ideas. But the fact is that you don't know what the next best one is going to be. And it's probably not going to be one of these. It might be one of these that takes over. But by having access to all of them, you can test different tools out. And I do use different tools depending on what I need. If I've just got a question that I haven't thought much about, I'll use their bot, which uses less energy tokens. If I need something, I need to upload 100,000 words of a podcast transcript and write show notes and make content from it, I'll use a really energy intensive AI within the tool. If I just want some ideas on like headlines for an email and I'm just going to upload less context, I'll use a mid-strength and mid-power one. If I need a really good image, I'll use a powerful image tool like Playground. So yeah, you can essentially tailor it throughout your day to what you need. Go to Poe.com. Highly recommend it. I don't get anything out of saying this. I just really love the app.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much, Callum. Any last words for our audience members?
Oh, firstly, thank you for having me, Mark. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you. You're keeping me on my feet with the questions. But I think lastly is, look, you don't have to do social good as a business, but what I would say is that as business people and entrepreneurs, we are essentially directing resources, financial and physical resources, to bring our goals to life. And being the ones who have this alchemy to move resources around, we have the potential to change the world. If you think, oh, that's not me, I don't really care, then that's fine. Just run your business. But if you have even the slightest hankering of interest, what I can say is that doing good is probably can be quite selfish, but that's coming across the wrong way. What I mean is doing good and helping brings so much joy and fulfillment to your life beyond what you can possibly imagine. And if you're thinking about it, just dip your toes in the water and see if you like it. And if you don't, you have to do it. But I certainly love it. And that's just me.
That's good. Thank you so much for being on the show, Callum. I hope we get to talk to you soon again.
Thank you for having me, mate. It's really nice to chat. Have a nice day.